constantly shaping things, shaping opinion, influencing strategy, changing how politics even works. Our goal today is to help you connect those dots, the ones that often seem pretty separate, give you a more holistic picture, not just a pile of headlines. By the end, you should have a much clearer, more nuanced view of the challenges, the opportunities for Donald Trump, and, well, what that might mean for the U.S. political future overall. It's really about getting beyond the day-to-day noise, grasping the underlying stuff.
Okay, let's unpack this then. To start, where does Donald Trump actually stand right now as of 2025? What's his footing? Politically, legally, culturally, given everything that's happened recently, where is he positioned?
Well, politically, it's pretty clear he still has a remarkable hold. Polling suggests he's still leading within key Republican circles, often by, quite big margins. And this isn't just name recognition. It speaks to a deep, sustained base of support. Despite all the controversies, all the challenges over the years, it hasn't really fragmented like many observers thought it might. For a huge chunk of the GOP electorate, he's still the undisputed leader. He can mobilize massive support, generate incredible enthusiasm. This continued dominance, it gives him a unique platform, a kind of leverage most other politicians just don't have, lets him shape the party's agenda, the narrative, even from outside a formal leadership role.
Right. And it's not just the polls, is it? What about the money? Because that's always crucial.
Exactly. And that's the other critical piece, his financial power. Reports show his fundraising is still robust. Actually, it's seen an uptick, even with all the legal battles swirling around him. And this is so important because, well, national campaigns, they need immense amounts of cash, right? This strong fundraising translates directly into political leverage. It lets him pay for his legal defenses, which are extensive. It lets him keep up that strong digital presence, maybe support political allies, project strength to supporters and opponents alike. A candidate with money can sustain a campaign, run ads, hold rallies, keep a powerful media footprint, things you just can't do without cash. So, his ability to keep raising significant money, even facing these unprecedented legal fights, shows an enduring, significant base of financial support. It underpins his political goals, gives him a unique kind of political currency.
Okay, so strong polling, strong fundraising. What about his online presence? That seems central to his whole operation.
Absolutely central. His digital dominance is pervasive, you just can't deny it. Truth Social has really cemented itself as his main communication channel. It's like a direct, unfiltered pipe to his base. He gets to bypass traditional media gatekeepers, deliver his message exactly how he wants, no outside editing. It's super effective for shaping narratives, mobilizing support. And this direct line is then amplified by, well, what people call Maggie influencers. This network of online personalities, content creators, they play a huge role in spreading his messages, creating memes, keeping digital engagement high across different platforms, X, Rumble, YouTube, you name it. It creates this powerful sort of self-reinforcing echo chamber. His narratives get spread, validated, amplified by people who already agree. Creates a strong sense of community, of truth within that sphere, making outside info harder to penetrate. It's an incredibly effective distribution network for his message. Rallies support with amazing speed and intensity.
And that echo chamber effect is powerful. Which leads us to something you mentioned earlier, that hint about maybe going third party. Tell us more about that.
Right. This is maybe one of the most significant and definitely intriguing hints about where he is right now. That very public tease of a potential third-party run, it was at a rally, June 2025, Ohio. He was quoted directly saying, "We may just have to go our own way." Just that phrase. Even though it was just a hint, the impact across the Republican establishment was immediate. You could feel it. It threw this huge element of uncertainty, strategic pressure into the mix. For the GOP, it immediately brought up the nightmare scenario, a split vote, which historically is just disastrous for third-party bids, right? The strategic implications of just teasing it are profound. It lets Trump put immense pressure on the party leadership. Even if he never actually does it, the possibility forces the party to weigh his demands, consider his influence. They know alienating him could fracture the conservative vote and, well, basically hand victory to the Democrats. It kind of holds the party hostage, doesn't it? They have to balance the risk of pushing him away against the potential electoral catastrophe of a three-way race.
Wow. Yeah, that quote, "go our own way," it really does hammer home the leverage he still has. It's a brilliant, if maybe risky, strategic move. Keeps everyone on edge. But here's where it gets, I think, even more complex, even more fascinating. All this political maneuvering, the fundraising, the digital stuff, it's all happening against this backdrop of just unprecedented legal chaos. So the core question has to be, how do these multiplying simultaneous legal challenges actually intersect with the political campaign? Or maybe impede it, especially one looking towards 2026?
That intersection, the legal battles and the political ambition, it's undeniably one of the most complex, unique parts of his whole situation right now. He's facing this multi-front legal war, federal, state, civil actions all running at the same time.
Just to break it down for you, our sources list several key challenges systematically. Federally, you've got the election interference charges. Those center on alleged conspiracy to overturn the 2020 election. Very fundamental stuff about democratic process. Then, charges about mishandling classified documents. That touches directly on national security, handling sensitive government info properly. On top of those, state-level fraud cases, usually about his business practices, and then a whole range of ongoing civil lawsuits, defamation, other accusations. It's an enormous amount of legal activity for anyone, let alone a former president thinking about running again. And the big question everyone asks, could any of this actually stop him from running? Legally, I mean. What are the implications for his eligibility?
That's incredibly complex and, honestly, still evolving legally. The Constitution sets pretty broad qualifications for president, right? Natural-born citizen, 35 years old. But the debate now is whether certain convictions, especially related to federal office or maybe insurrection, could trigger that rarely used clause in the 14th Amendment, or just create a legal challenge the courts haven't really dealt with before in this exact context. There's no clear precedent, no universally agreed upon answer for a candidate in his position. Legal scholars, political analysts, they're constantly reassessing as things develop. It's uncharted and deeply significant legal territory.
Okay, so legally uncertain, but what about politically? How does all this play out in terms of public perception? Because it seems to cut both ways.
It absolutely does. These legal battles have shaped public perception profoundly, creating two very distinct, almost parallel narratives. On one side, you have that powerful martyr narrative. It's largely embraced by his really fervent base. From their perspective, the pileup of charges isn't evidence of wrongdoing. It's proof he's being unfairly targeted. Political opponents, a biased justice system. His supporters often see him as a victim of a politically motivated witch hunt. And that narrative can actually galvanize their support, reinforces their belief that he fights for us against powerful, corrupt forces. This deep identity connection his supporters have with him, seeing him not just as a politician but as a symbol fighting for their values, often fueled by grievance, wanting disruption makes that narrative incredibly potent, resistant to outside fact.
And the other side?
The other side is the criminal narrative. Opponents see the sheer volume and nature of the charges as just compelling evidence he's unfit for office. This view reinforces the perception that he operates outside the law, outside ethical boundaries. For many, it cements their belief he shouldn't return to power. Our sources summed it up really well with a quote, "He's not above the law, but he's also not beneath using it to his advantage," end quote. And that points to the strategic side of this legal mess. Trump has consistently used these challenges to rally his base, paint himself as the outsider fighting the establishment, even boost his fundraising significantly. The legal process itself, slow and drawn out as it often is, gives him constant chances to be in the news, to comment, to challenge, to reinforce whatever narrative he chooses: defiance, victimhood. It's this continuous high-stakes political drama playing out in courtrooms, but it also functions as a really powerful campaign tool for him.
That is just fascinating. Using the legal fight as part of the campaign.
And what makes it truly unprecedented is, well, no former president has ever run for office while actively fighting so many legal cases at once. This raises huge practical challenges for campaigning. Our source material even speculates about, the hypothetical but maybe possible challenge of campaigning from behind bars. Now, that's still highly speculative, an extreme scenario. But even just the idea of a presidential candidate having to split time between court and the campaign trail, or facing legal limits on travel, on communication, it would be a logistical and political nightmare like nothing we've ever seen. It would fundamentally change the dynamics of an American political campaign, force the electorate to grapple with circumstances completely alien to history. It's totally uncharted territory for American politics. It speaks volumes about this particular figure and the challenges he poses to norms.
You're absolutely right. The sheer scale of it, campaigning under those conditions, it would have profound implications for 2026, reshaping everything we thought we knew about presidential races. Now, given this unprecedented legal mess, you'd almost expect his support to weaken, wouldn't you? But Maybe surprisingly, that's not quite what we're seeing across the board. Let's shift focus now to the bedrock, the Magi base. Historically, they've stuck by him through things that would have sunk anyone else. So the question for 2025 is, has that loyalty stayed solid through all this? Or are we starting to see cracks, maybe younger conservatives looking at, say, DeSantis or Ramaswamy?
That's an excellent point. It gets right to the core of his enduring political viability, doesn't it? Historically, the consistency of Magi voters' support for Trump, it's been nothing short of remarkable. An exceptional degree of loyalty. They often see criticism of him as attacks on themselves or their values. And that core loyalty is still an incredibly powerful force in politics today.
But is it monolithic? Are there nuances?
There are. And our sources bring out some important nuances, reflecting different views you hear on the ground. We have insights from some street interview clips that really highlight this divergence within the conservative movement. On one hand, you hear that unwavering supporter, someone who, asked about controversies, just says something like, I don't care what he did, he fights for us.
That statement really captures a deep feeling in a big part of the base. It's not always about specific policies or even conduct in a traditional sense. It's about that perceived archetype. The fighter, the outsider, the one willing to challenge the establishment, the elites, for the common person. For these voters, Trump embodies defiance against what they see as a corrupt system. He's committed to their interests, even at, they believe, great personal cost. That narrative of him being their champion, it's incredibly powerful, transcends normal political calculations.
Okay, so that's the unwavering side. What's the other perspective? Then you hear a different viewpoint, signaling maybe an evolving segment. Something like, it's time for new leadership. I'm Team Nikki now. This suggests a growing desire among some Republicans for a fresh start, maybe prioritizing stability or traditional conservative principles or just a less confrontational style. It suggests that while the core loyalty to Trump is strong, there's a segment maybe tired of the constant drama, the legal fights, that's actively looking for alternatives. Doesn't mean they're ditching conservative ideals necessarily, just looking for a different messenger or maybe a different approach. It's subtle but significant. Worth watching.
Interesting. And do we see this reflected in demographics, like rural versus suburban voters, for example?
Yes, absolutely. When we break down the demographics, these nuances get even clearer. It's more like a mosaic of allegiances. We see continued strong rural loyalty. Rural voters have consistently been a really robust source of support for Trump. This loyalty often comes down to his direct communication style, his focus on issues that resonate in agricultural communities, places outside big cities, a shared sense of alienation from perceived cultural elites. They feel seen and heard by him, maybe in a way they don't by other politicians. That connection runs deep. It's a steadfast electoral bloc.
It's suburbs.
Stark contrast. Our sources note suburban GOP voters showing fatigue. This group, often more moderate Republicans or independents-leaning conservative, they seem to be showing clear signs of wavering or actively looking elsewhere. Suburban voters often prioritize stability, the economy, less divisive talk. The constant cycle of controversy, legal battles, confrontational politics, it might just be wearing on them. Makes them more open to candidates offering a calmer, maybe more traditional Republican vision. And these suburban voters are often the crucial swing voters, right? They aren't reliably partisan. They decide elections by shifting support based on issues, candidate vibe, the general mood. So this fatigue could be critical in a general election. Suburban voters often act as the kingmakers.
What about evangelical voters? They're such a key part of the GOP coalition.
Right. Our sources describe their engagement as divided but still engaged. Evangelicals are a cornerstone, definitely. And while many have stayed steadfast with Trump, there's a growing internal debate within that powerful bloc. Some evangelicals prioritize moral character, traditional values, which might give them pause. Others, though, might prioritize judicial appointments, a perceived defense of religious liberties areas where Trump definitely delivered for them. This internal division means that while they're still highly engaged politically, their support for any single candidate, even Trump, might not be as monolithic as it once seemed. This internal complexity makes them a really important demographic to watch closely. Any big shifts among evangelicals could seriously impact election outcomes.
Okay, so putting that all together, what does it mean for Trump's strategy, his viability heading towards 2026? It sounds like he has this incredibly devoted core, but fractures are maybe developing that could pose real challenges, especially in a general election scenario.
Precisely. That unwavering loyalty from a big chunk of his base gives him an undeniable floor of support. That's a huge advantage in primaries, makes him a formidable force within the party. That loyal core also acts as a powerful deterrent against strong challenges from inside the party. Anyone opposing him knows they risk alienating a huge part of the Republican electorate, maybe killing their own political future. And it ensures his fundraising stays strong, as we talked about, which is just crucial for any sustained political effort.
But the ceiling is the issue.
Exactly. The signs of fatigue among suburban voters, the more nuanced position of evangelicals. They highlight a potential ceiling for his broader appeal. His base can carry him through a primary, maybe. But winning a general election means expanding beyond that core. Suburban voters, especially, are often the swing voters deciding national elections. If they're getting tired of the drama, looking for a different kind of leadership, it could seriously hamper his ability to win over those crucial, independent, and moderate Republican voters you need for a general election win. It forces this strategic dilemma. Does he double down on his base, potentially pushing away moderates? Or try to broaden his appeal, risking the passion of his most loyal supporters? It's a political tightrope walk, and how he navigates that will absolutely define his campaign strategy going forward.
That's a critical point. A real strategic reckoning for the whole party, navigating that loyalty versus electability tightrope. And it leads us straight into the internal dynamics within the Republican Party itself. It seems like Trump, while still incredibly powerful, isn't maybe entirely untouchable anymore, or at least he's facing more open challenges than before. Who are the key players challenging his dominance inside the GOP now? How's that internal struggle shaping up?
Yeah, the internal GOP landscape is definitely becoming more contested. It reflects exactly that loyalty versus electability dilemma you just mentioned. We've certainly seen shifts in who's seen as a potential rival. Ron DeSantis, for instance. He was widely seen as a rising star for a while, right? Positioned by many as the heir apparent, or at least a strong alternative, especially with his conservative record. But our sources suggest he's been losing ground. Why? Several factors, maybe? Perhaps an inability to really differentiate himself from Trump while still appealing to the base. Or maybe not having that same kind of charisma that fuels Trump's unique connection. DeSantis himself talked about needing a different direction, quoted saying, "We need generational change." That highlights the feeling among some conservatives that the party needs to move on, embrace new leaders, yet turning that feeling into actual gains against Trump has proven really, really difficult. He struggled to turn policy wins into broad primary support.
What about Nikki Haley? Her strategy seems different.
Very different. Nikki Haley has pursued a distinct strategy, gaining centrist support. Her approach is appealing to more moderate Republicans, independents, positioning herself as pragmatic, less polarizing. It shows a potential path for a more traditional or moderate Republican candidate, trying to win back voters maybe alienated by Trump's style, the party's recent direction. And her challenge to the party's focus on Trump is pretty direct. She was quoted saying, "The Republican Party isn't a cult of personality." That clearly states her view. The party needs to broaden its appeal, move beyond one figure. Suggests a significant group in the GOP trying to redefine the party's identity, emphasizing principles over personality.
And Vivek Ramaswamy, he seemed to get some traction too.
Right. Sources mention him briefly as another figure attracting younger conservatives, especially those who like his articulate, though sometimes controversial, populism, his willingness to challenge norms. His rise just further diversifies the field, shows there's a hunger for new voices, new ideas in the party, especially among younger voters, maybe without that same historical tie to Trump or established figures. These different candidates, different strategies, it all signals a party in flux, really grappling with its identity, its future.
Beyond the potential candidates, what about the established party leadership, like in the Senate?
Mm-hmm.
Are they pushing back?
It's more subtle there. Sources describe it as quiet opposition from Senate leaders. It's usually not a direct, overt challenge to Trump. More like a strategic distancing, maybe. A subtle effort to reassert traditional Republican values, legislative priorities, focusing on policy, not rhetoric. They might not criticize him publicly often, but their actions, their legislative goals sometimes show a desire to steer the party in a direction less tied to Trump's immediate influence, favoring institutional stability. At the same time, you hear this widely reported feeling among young GOP members that they're just tired of Trump drama. Indicates a strong generational wish for a different political style. Less chaotic, maybe. More focused on policy, governing, not constant controversy and personal attacks. They might want to move past the personality-driven politics of the last few years, get back to something more stable, predictable.
But despite all the rivals, the quiet opposition, the fatigue, Trump still holds a lot of sway, doesn't he? How does he maintain that control?
He does, and our sources point to two main levers: fear and fundraising. The fear is about his undeniable influence over his base. Any Republican openly opposing him risks facing the wrath of his supporters. That could seriously jeopardize their own political careers, their re-election chances. It creates this chilling effect, discourages open dissent within the party ranks, and at the same time, his powerful fundraising machine gives him immense influence. He can support allies, fund PACs, direct resources, making him indispensable, even if sometimes inconvenient, for many in the party who rely on his financial clout and grassroots energy for their own campaigns.
So it creates this fundamental tension.
Exactly. A profound loyalty versus electability dilemma facing the GOP. Party leaders, strategists, they're caught. Do they prioritize loyalty to Trump? That keeps the base unified, but might alienate crucial swing voters needed to win a general election? Or do they choose someone seen as more electable overall, which could risk fracturing the party, alienating Trump's loyalists, maybe leading to a disastrous internal civil war? This dilemma is right at the heart of the GOP's internal struggle. It'll heavily influence their strategy heading into 2026. It's a high-stakes balancing act, huge implications for the future of the Republican Party as we know it.
That loyalty versus electability dilemma, it really is fascinating. A battle for the party's soul, in a way. How do they walk that tightrope? And it brings us to another critical battlefield shaping all this, the evolving media war. In this landscape, mainstream media versus MAGO media, who's actually winning? And what does it mean for how information gets consumed, how campaigns are run, especially with these increasingly unconventional methods, emerging tech like AI?
Yeah, this media war is just a defining feature of modern politics, and Trump has been a real pioneer in shaping how it works. His reliance on Truth Social, it isn't just a preference. It's deeply strategic. It's his digital fortress.
Mm-hmm.
By mostly communicating through Truth Social, he directly controls the message. He avoids real-time fact-checking or critical takes from traditional outlets, and he cultivates that direct, unfiltered, deeply loyal connection with his followers. It's his central command for getting info out. He can post constantly without outside filters.
But it's not just Truth Social, right? He's active elsewhere, too.
Definitely. His digital influence goes way beyond Truth Social. Other platforms like X, Twitter, Rumble, YouTube, they also play big roles. X allows for that rapid spread, quick engagement, turns his statements into instant trending topics, rallying points. Rumble and YouTube offer platforms for longer stuff, interviews, rallies, commentary that might not get covered the same way on mainstream channels. This multi-platform strategy makes sure his message gets into various digital ecosystems, reaches different segments of his base and beyond, creates a pervasive, consistent narrative.
And now we're seeing things like AI enter the picture. Memes have been around, but AI feels different.
It does. And what's truly revolutionary and maybe most worrying for traditional media for a shared sense of reality is the fast rise of right-wing meme culture and the accelerating emergence of sophisticated AI content in political campaigns. Meme culture, often funny, provocative, designed to get complex political messages across in super shareable, easy to digest ways, lets narratives go viral incredibly fast, bypasses gatekeepers entirely. These aren't just jokes. They're incredibly effective tools for political messaging, building identity, even subtle persuasion, operating at a speed traditional media just can't match. And integrating AI content takes it a huge step further. Our sources gave a specific example. An AI-generated deepfake ad claiming Biden is a hologram, reportedly used by a Trump PAC back in June 2025. This isn't just about misleading info anymore. It fundamentally erodes the shared factual baseline needed for democratic debate. Deepfakes can create incredibly convincing but totally false videos or audio, makes it profoundly hard for the average person to tell truth from fiction, creates this deep epistemic crisis where collective reality just fractures.
And the whole fake news label still works for him.
It continues to resonate deeply with a big part of the electorate. By branding critical media coverage as fake news, he strategically undermines trust in traditional journalism, creates a vacuum that his own narratives, his own channels, rush in to fill. That branding, it's not just rhetoric, it's a powerful tool. Lets him control the narrative, insulate his base from dissenting info, foster deep distrust of any source that doesn't fit his message.
So is this dangerous, or just how campaigning works now?
That's the critical debate, isn't it? Is this evolution in media and AI dangerous for political discourse? Or just the evolution of modern campaigning? Those arguing it's dangerous point to the potential for widespread disinformation, the erosion of shared facts, making it harder to hold political actors accountable when they can just deny reality or make up their own. The ability to create convincing fake content, plus the speed of online spread. It's a fundamental threat to democratic processes that rely on informed public discussion. On the flip side, some might argue it's just the natural evolution. Campaigns have to adapt to new tech to reach voters. Maybe voters are savvy enough to figure it out. Or the responsibility is on individuals to critically evaluate info, though that burden is getting heavier and heavier.
And traditional journalism just can't keep up.
The challenge is immense. Legacy media relies on verification, fact-checking, slower cycles. It's just ill-equipped to fight the speed and virality of deepfake, sophisticated meme culture. Creates this significant lag. Makes it harder for objective information to effectively counteract mis- or disinformation in real time. And that profoundly influences voters' perceptions, the very nature of political reality.
That point about the nature of political reality itself being shaped, it's huge. Changes how voters see candidates, issues, who they trust.
Yeah.
Which leads us to what could be the most defining shift of all. If Trump actually breaks from the GOP, he's hinted at it, used it as leverage. But what if he really goes through with it? How would a third-party run fundamentally reshape 2026? What are the potential consequences? They seem massive.
If he truly broke away, launched a third-party bid, it would be an unparalleled event. Profound implications. Arguably bigger than anything we've seen in, a century. Our sources cite insights from political strategists, laying out the scenarios pretty clearly. The most immediate, significant impact, splitting the right-wing vote. Means the conservative electorate, which usually rallies around the Republican candidate in general elections, would be divided between Trump's third-party campaign and the mainstream GOP nominee. This isn't hypothetical, it's math. And historically, it undermines third-party bids. Think Ross Perot in the 90s, right? Or even Teddy Roosevelt's Bull Moose run in 1912. Both pulled votes from their traditional parties, ended up helping the other side.
So Democrats would benefit.
Almost certainly. The primary beneficiary of that kind of split would likely be the Democrats. This division would likely benefit Democrats in swing states. Those states are already decided by razor-thin margins. In close contests, where elections often come down to a few thousand votes, even a small percentage siphoned off by a third party can flip the whole thing. If Trump runs as an independent, he'd mainly pull votes from the Republican base, right? Reduces the GOP candidates' total. That could effectively hand victories to Democratic candidates, even if they don't get an outright majority of the total vote. It'd be a fundamental shift in electoral mechanics for 2026. Changes the whole competitive balance in key states.
And longer term, could it break the Republican Party?
Beyond just 2026, yes. A Trump third-party run holds the potential for a long-term fracture within the Republican Party. Could extend far beyond one election. This isn't just about one cycle. It could fundamentally realign American political parties, create a lasting split. If a big chunk of Trump's base follows him into a new party, maybe a patriot party, like some suggest, it could permanently weaken the GOP. Maybe reduce it to a regional or minority party. Or force a complete overhaul of its platform, its leadership, to compete for more centrist voters. The party, as we know it, could undergo a massive, lasting transformation, potentially leading to a new multi-party system or a complete redefinition of the two major parties we have now.
What specific scenarios are people talking about?
Our sources lay out a few possibilities. One is the Trump plus Patriot Party scenario. He forms or leads a new political entity. That would give his independent run institutional weight. Could be a durable vehicle for his movement outside the GOP structure with its own fundraising, organizing. Another scenario, the GOP nominates DeSantis or Haley as their mainstream candidate. That forces a genuine three-way race with Trump on a third-party line. In that case, the traditional Republican candidate faces the Democrat and a huge challenge from a Trump third party. Makes their path to victory incredibly narrow, complex. They basically need to win a plurality of a fractured conservative vote.
And could he still run as an outsider, even after being president?
That's the final scenario mentioned. Trump campaigns as an outsider again. Despite having been president, he's always masterfully used that anti-establishment outsider appeal. Even running third party, he could reframe it as fighting both the establishment GOP and the Democrats. Double down on the populist talk. Position himself as the only true voice of the people. Allows him to tap into that same anti-system feeling that fueled his initial rise, even having held the highest office. Creates a narrative of continuous rebellion against the entrenched political class.
It really does underscore the unprecedented nature of this, the huge potential consequences. It's not just one election, it's a critical decision point that could change American politics for decades, redraw the whole map.
And that brings us to our final segment. Let's zoom out, connect these threads to the bigger picture. Trump isn't just one figure. He represents and has amplified much broader shifts in American politics, society. What are those underlying forces at play? The ones he both embodies and seems to accelerate. Right. This is where we think about the broader impact on American democracy itself. One of the biggest themes is the erosion, or at least reevaluation, of trust in institutions. Trump's style challenging norms, government bodies, traditional media has deeply intersected with, and often amplify, a pre-existing decline in public trust. Trust in the judiciary, the electoral process, the press. His rhetoric often frames these institutions as biased, corrupt, part of a deep state. Leads many supporters to question their legitimacy, their authority. This fundamental shift in trust has huge implications for how a democracy functions. You need a shared belief in foundational institutions for stability, consensus, peaceful transfers of power.
And the populism aspect.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take your sources and really unpack the most fascinating insights.
Great to be digging in.
Today we're embarking on, well, a pretty unique journey. It's a deep dive into the origin story of a figure who, as your notes highlight, truly changed American politics forever. Before the rallies, before the indictments, the tweets, the red hats, there was a businessman, a media celebrity, a master of headlines.
It's a truly compelling narrative, isn't it? And I think to really understand the political figure he became, we absolutely have to explore those foundations first.
Exactly.
You know, the upbringing, the business ventures, and they were distinct ventures, and that pervasive media presence that shaped him long, long before he actually stepped onto the political stage.
Right. Our mission today is really to extract those critical nuggets from the materials you provided, helping you understand how this remarkable and some would say unlikely evolution unfolded.
Yeah, we'll trace how these threads, which seem quite separate at first glance, real estate, branding, reality TV, how they ultimately wove together
to create this singular public persona. One that really resonated with a huge segment of the American populace, often in ways that, well, many observers just didn't see coming.
They really didn't. Dismissed it even.
Yeah, they dismissed it. So we're not just looking at dates and events here. We're trying to get at the undercurrents, the formative personality traits, the strategic choices that paved this improbable path.
From Queens, essentially, to the doorstep of the White House.
Exactly. So how did this all come together? Let's unpack this journey right from the very beginning. Okay, so the sources take us back to 1946. Queens, New York. Donald John Trump is born.
Right.
And I found it particularly striking in the materials he grew up in significant wealth. This wasn't a small detail.
No, not at all. His father, Fred Trump, he wasn't just successful. By that time, mid-century, he was a highly established, really formidable figure in New York City real estate.
Especially known for those big middle-income housing projects, right? In the outer boroughs.
Exactly. Queens, Brooklyn, Staten Island. He built a lot of housing. So for Donald, this was absolutely not a rags to riches story.
No. It was inheriting and then, well, attempting to massively expand on an existing empire.
That's a critical observation, especially when you think about how his own approach to business and really public life developed later. Fred Trump was known for being shrewd, disciplined.
Knew his way around regulations, financing.
Definitely. Ambitious, for sure, but maybe a bit more understated in his public dealings compared to his son.
Yeah, quite a contrast later on.
And what's fascinating here, according to your sources, is how those early influences seem to pop up later. The materials mention his time at military school, New York Military Academy.
Right.
And apparently he developed this reputation there. Aggressive, fiercely competitive.
These aren't just footnotes in a biography, are they?
Not at all. They feel like formative traits. Your notes even point out they'd later define his public persona. You can almost picture it, right? That environment, rigid discipline, hierarchy, constant competition, it could easily foster or at least amplify a certain assertiveness, maybe a win-at-all-costs kind of mindset.
Which raises that question you mentioned earlier. How much of a public figure's later behavior, especially in these high-stakes, often combative arenas like politics, how much is rooted right there in those foundational experiences?
Is it learned? Is it amplified? It's hard to untangle, but it seems significant.
It really does. That thread of aggression, competitiveness, it seems to echo all the way through. So after military school, he heads to Wharton, University of Pennsylvania, graduates in 1968.
And that's not just any business school. It's Wharton. Elite. Strategic choice.
Gives him that formal grounding in commerce, finance, the whole economic landscape. But interestingly, he doesn't strike out completely on his own after that.
No, he goes into the family business.
Yeah.
But like you said, with a really distinct vision.
Yeah.
Very different from his father's.
Which becomes clear pretty quickly.
Precisely. Well, Fred Trump had built this massive success in those, outer borough residential projects, often using government loans, tax breaks. Young Donald pivots decisively
Towards Manhattan.
towards the glamour, the high profile, the big stage. That move itself was incredibly ambitious. It signals right away, I want something grander, higher stakes, more public.
And his early projects really show that shift, don't they?
Absolutely. Think about the Commodore Hotel near Grand Central. Totally run down. He transforms it into the Grand Hyatt. That was a complex deal, needed Hyatt as a partner, innovative financing, city tax breaks, a huge undertaking.
And then, the big one, Trump Tower.
Trump Tower, completed 83. Iconic. These weren't just buildings. They were like architectural statements, gleaming brass, reflective glass, all designed to scream luxury, ambition, a kind of audacious triumph right in the heart of Manhattan.
The scale, the finishes, the location, totally different from his father's work.
Completely. Fred built housing, Donald was building spectacles.
And even back then, doing these early deals, there were hints of that public persona to come. More than hints, maybe.
Yeah.
Your sources pull out that paraphrased quote, almost a philosophy. When you're a star, they let you do it.
Wow. Early on.
Yeah, incredibly telling, isn't it? It suggests that brashness, that sense of entitlement, maybe, or exceptionalism, the idea that the rules might not apply to him. It started way back, maybe even before he was a household name.
It implies that status, or just the perception of status, gives you leeway, lets you push boundaries others can't.
It's a fascinating glimpse, isn't it, into how that public identity started forming. The self-assured boundary pusher we saw later, he was already taking shape back then.
It seems like he understood perception was power right from the get-go.
Okay, so he's laid this foundation in Manhattan real estate. Big, flashy projects. How does he then pivot from just building properties to building this entire brand around himself in the 80s?
Right, because this next phase is where Trump the brand really takes flight.
We're talking gold everything, practically. Golden buildings, the sheer opulence of the casinos, Trump Plaza, the Taj Mahal.
Private helicopters with his name plastered on them.
Trump water, Trump steaks. I mean, it was everywhere. An image of just unparalleled success, luxury, meticulously crafted and broadcast.
He wasn't just developing properties anymore. He was developing an image, a lifestyle, this perception of ultimate triumph that was almost fantastical but also aspirational for a lot of people.
Everything with the Trump name screamed wealth, power, almost audacious success.
It's a remarkable case study in persona building.
Yeah.
Especially, before the internet really took hold, image was still controlled through TV, big newspapers, glossy magazines.
And he mastered those channels.
He wasn't just building structures, he was building this aspirational lifestyle. A dream people could buy into, even just by watching on TV or reading about him.
But the sources provide a really crucial counterpoint here, don't they?
Absolutely. Adds a lot of nuance. Because behind that gilded facade, he was facing multiple corporate bankruptcies, Chapter 11 reorganizations, mostly tied to the casino empire.
Despite all the glitz and media attention, those casinos ultimately collapsed under huge debt loads in the early 90s.
The Taj Mahal, for instance. One of the biggest bankruptcies Atlantic City had ever seen at the time.
So you have this stark contradiction. The public image of the Midas touch, unblemished success,
clashing sharply with these significant financial setbacks. And that contradiction is absolutely central to understanding his public appeal later on.
How so?
Well, it suggests this amazing disconnect between perception and financial reality. A disconnect he was just uniquely brilliant at managing. Exploiting even.
Which leads to the really interesting part. Despite these massive financial problems, the bankruptcies, the casinos tanking, which would have just destroyed most public figures,
he somehow remained a media darling. How?
Your sources nail it. He sold confidence and controversy. He just understood the media landscape intuitively, maybe better than anyone. He knew even bad press was still press. That a bold, confident, often contentious persona was way more captivating than being quiet and cautious.
He understood that a compelling narrative, even if it was, let's say, embellished or full of conflict, that was the ultimate currency in media.
He'd call into talk shows, drop provocative statements, guaranteed headlines.
And this really highlights a critical insight, doesn't it? Public perception can be so much more powerful, more resilient than the underlying financial facts, especially when you cultivate it through constant strategic media engagement.
Those grand openings, Trump Plaza, the Taj, they weren't just business events.
No, they were public performances, spectacles, carefully orchestrated to project that image, Midas touch, master deal maker.
And even though they failed dramatically, cost him fortunes, required massive restructuring, the narrative he built around them.
The image of the fearless, larger-than-life guy who always came out on top, that persisted.
It shows this incredible ability to control his own story, even when the facts pointed elsewhere.
He knew that in the court of public opinion, a strong personal brand could weather storms that would sink others. He could always frame a setback as, a strategic move, or blame someone else.
And it wasn't just buildings and casinos fueling this brand. There was the book, 1987, The Art of the Deal.
Instant bestseller. Sold millions.
Even though, as your sources are very clear, it was ghostwritten by Tony Schwartz.
Which is so telling in itself, isn't it? The brand was bigger than the actual authorship.
The book painted him as the ultimate dealmaker, strategic genius, master negotiator, reinforcing the image from the buildings and the media.
The fact that someone else actually wrote it just underscored the point. The persona, the idea of Trump the tycoon, that's what mattered. Not the nitty-gritty details. It's about the narrative he wanted out there.
And the book was a huge vehicle for that narrative.
Precisely. It solidified that image. Master dealmaker, ruthless efficiency. Combine that with the constant tabloid appearances.
Oh yeah, documenting the marriages, divorces, lavish parties, public feuds.
Gold penthouses, supermodels.
Man.
He became this undeniable fixture of pop culture.
And that wasn't an accident.
Not at all. Deliberate cultivation of celebrity, blurring the lines between business, entertainment, personal life. He seemed to thrive on the attention. Understood that scandal could be just as valuable as success in keeping his name out there.
So this potent mix, apparent success, captivating scandal, it laid the groundwork for what came next, didn't it?
Absolutely. Moving him from just a businessman with media savvy to a full-blown, undeniable celebrity. He knew the power of being perpetually in the headlines no matter why.
Okay, so building on that image, the dealmaker, master of headlines, how did he make that next leap? From business mogul to this nationally recognized media celebrity in the 90s and early 2000s.
Right, because the sources show this really fascinating pivotal shift here. In the public eye, Trump became less about the traditional real estate deals.
And much more about just being a celebrity.
Exactly. And this transition was absolutely crucial. It cemented his image in the public mind in a totally new way. He went from being maybe a New York fixture to a household name across the country, even for people who didn't follow business news.
So how did he manage that?
Well, what's striking is how deliberately he embraced popular culture. Not as a side thing, but as the main vehicle for his brand and public engagement.
And the peak of that has to be The Apprentice.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Hosting The Apprentice from 2004 to 2015. This wasn't just a side gig. It was basically a masterclass in self-promotion, a weekly primetime ad for his persona, his brand of business smarts.
The whole setup, aspiring entrepreneurs competing for a job with him.
It positioned him as the ultimate decider, the arbiter of success. And that catchphrase,
"You're fired,"
became an absolute pop culture phenomenon, instantly recognizable. It projected this image of decisive, no-nonsense leadership, someone in charge, not afraid to make tough calls.
Delivered with that perfect reality TV dramatic flair.
And the show's editing really amplified that, made him look infallible, always in control.
And the reach of that show, it was huge.
Massive. He built this incredibly loyal TV audience. And your sources specifically emphasize, particularly in working-class homes.
Which is fascinating, because that's not just entertainment then, is it? It's a direct connection, almost intimate, with a demographic that would later be absolutely critical for his political rise.
Exactly. People might have seen him before as this billionaire, elitist figure, but the show let him project something different. Relatable, almost. Decisive, willing to speak plainly, bluntly even.
It created this familiarity, and for many, a surprising sense of trust or admiration, with people who probably wouldn't have otherwise connected with a Manhattan mogul known for gold everything.
He became a familiar face in living rooms everywhere, not just on the business pages.
And during this time, he wasn't just on his own show, he was everywhere.
Indeed. He was actively rubbing elbows with all sorts of public figures, popping up on Oprah, which showed his crossover appeal.
His involvement with the WWE.
Right, those high-energy, performative appearances in professional wrestling, even connecting with cultural icons like Snoop Dogg. It just showed his versatility, his ability to move comfortably between totally different cultural worlds.
Celebrity philanthropy, wrestling, hip-hop. He was comfortable everywhere.
And the key insight from your materials here is profound. He mastered the American reality TV mindset.
What does that mean exactly? More than just being on TV.
Yeah, it's about understanding how reality TV works. how to simplify complex things into digestible stories, how to create drama, how to cast clear heroes and villains, and crucially, how to present a compelling, often larger-than-life character for a mass audience that maybe wants straightforward answers.
He got the power of narrative, conflict, quick resolution.
And he leveraged that understanding expertly.
So what's the takeaway from this whole celebrity era for his later trajectory?
Well, the sources are pretty blunt. Image mattered more than substance, and Trump knew exactly how to play that game.
This wasn't just about being famous for fame's sake.
No, it was about building this powerful, instantly recognizable, very personal brand through the most pervasive medium there was, television.
And the lessons he learned there. Direct audience engagement, cultivating that accessible but decisive persona, prioritizing a compelling story over maybe drier facts.
He proved incredibly potent when he finally jumped into politics. He was essentially campaigning on TV for years before he ever announced, building a ready-made audience primed for his particular style.
That you're fired approach to complex problems. Okay, so fast forward a bit. As we get closer to the mid-2010s, the sources make it clear that his political ambitions weren't just a sudden thing in 2016.
No, not at all. He'd been flirting with politics for a surprisingly long time, laying groundwork that, a lot of people at the time probably dismissed.
Just publicity stunts, maybe? Or passing whims?
Right. But it wasn't really a sudden pivot, more like an evolution of this public persona that had always kind of hovered around the edges of influence and commentary, testing the political waters.
And what's fascinating is that consistent thread of public commentary, engaging with political figures long before the big campaign.
Exactly. He ran briefly, remember, as a Reform Party candidate back in 2000.
That's right. Short-lived, but it signaled an early interest in that outsider lane, away from the two main parties.
He even explored a presidential bid back then. After that, he consistently, very publicly, criticized major political figures across the aisle.
He went after George W. Bush over the Iraq War.
Questioned Obama's policies frequently. Attacked Hillary Clinton regularly. This wasn't passive observation. It was active, vocal critique.
Delivered with that characteristic bluntness,
which kept him in the political conversation. Even without holding office, he was building this reputation as a critic of the establishment.
And then came a really critical moment, highlighted in your sources. 2011, he becomes the loudest voice, the main champion of the birther movement.
Right. The movement that baselessly claimed President Obama wasn't born in the U.S. and so was ineligible to be president.
Trump hammered on this relentlessly, demanding the birth certificate, questioning Obama's legitimacy. It was hugely controversial.
Drew massive condemnation from mainstream media, political figures, widely dismissed as a conspiracy theory. It was provocative, pushed boundaries, challenged norms in a way few others would dare.
So why did that matter so much for his eventual political rise, despite being, factually wrong and incredibly divisive?
Well, the sources argue it cemented his image as someone who said what others wouldn't, no matter how divisive or unpopular the claim.
In an era where maybe people felt political correctness was stifling.
Exactly. His willingness to voice these things, to directly challenge the sitting president, it resonated powerfully with a big segment of the population. People who felt unheard, frustrated, maybe even hostile towards conventional politics and media.
It created this perception of authenticity, fearlessness, even if it was rooted in baseless claims.
He was seen as the outsider, the renegade, willing to tackle uncomfortable stuff, speak an unvarnished truth, however inconvenient for the establishment.
It really did set him apart. And his early supporters, the sources quote them saying things like, "He's not afraid to speak the truth."
That narrative, the unfiltered voice, defying the establishment, became absolutely core to his appeal, long before he officially announced he was running for president.
He tapped into that deep anti-establishment feeling.
Forged a direct, almost visceral connection with people who felt overlooked, who believed the truth was being suppressed or sugar-coated.
So this positioning anti-establishment truth teller, even when the truth was disputed, it wasn't typical political strategy.
Not at all. It set him completely apart from the pack and built him this base of incredibly engaged, intensely loyal supporters.
Which brings us right to that pivotal moment. Your sources zero in on it, June 16th, 2015.
The escalator ride.
Donald Trump descending the golden escalator at Trump Tower, delivering an announcement that, as the materials say, just shocked the world.
The setting itself was pure Trump brand, wasn't it? Grand, theatrical, instantly iconic. His own tower, underscoring the empire, the brand he'd spent decades building.
And the speech itself, unorthodox, maybe rambling at times, but direct, confrontational, right from the start.
And that quote from the announcement, it became the bedrock of everything that followed.
I am officially running for president of the United States, and we are going to make our country great again.
Make our country great again.
GA.
It became this rallying cry. Simple, incredibly powerful, tapped into that deep sense of national decline, that longing for a return to some perceived past glory.
But the initial reaction...
The initial reaction from many media outlets was laughter, skepticism, outright derision.
Pundits, established journalists, they called it a stunt, a brand move, a joke that would fade fast.
And that widespread underestimation by the political establishment and media, that's such a crucial part of the story.
They missed something big.
They dismissed the showman, maybe, and failed to see the political disruptor emerging.
It's almost unbelievable looking back, isn't it? That confidence in dismissing him.
It really is, because the sources show that by mid-2016, barely a year later, something profound had happened. Unprecedented.
Trump had, and I'm quoting here, destroyed political norms, crushed 16 GOP candidates, and captured a massive populist wave.
He defied every single conventional wisdom about how you run for president.
The rallies, unlike anything we'd seen. Huge, energetic, like rock concerts, him speaking off the cuff, directly to supporters, bypassing the media filter.
His use of social media. Prolific, provocative, unprecedented, communicating instantly, personally.
He didn't just win primaries, he completely reshaped the Republican primary landscape. Overwhelmed seasoned governors, senators, people playing by the old rules.
Which connects back to what we were saying earlier. His past career, businessman, reality TV star, it ironically gave him this unique, potent skill set for political disruption.
Right, and the sources lay out those key themes that hit home with that populist wave. Showed his intuitive grasp of public feeling, his ability to connect directly with people who felt left behind.
That populist wave, anti-establishment, anti-elite, anti-globalist.
Yeah.
They found their champion in him.
His themes were clear. That uncompromising anti-immigration stance.
Promising the Great Wall, stricter border controls. Tapping into fears about identity, economic security.
The promise to drain the swamp.
Incredibly effective appeal. Dismantle perceived corruption, inefficiency in D.C. Resonated with that widespread distrust of government.
The America First agenda.
Prioritizing national interests in trade, foreign policy over global agreements, hit home with those who felt globalism hurt American jobs. Sovereignty.
And maybe most powerfully, his constant, direct targeting of the mainstream media.
Branding them fake news, enemies of the people. That resonated so deeply with people who already felt the media was biased or just didn't get their concern.
These themes just tapped into this widespread discontent, especially among people feeling marginalized, forgotten by the establishment, offered simple, direct answers to complicated problems.
And you combine those themes with the persona he'd already built.
The decisive, unfiltered, unconventional outsider.
Who wasn't afraid to speak his mind. It resonated deeply with that loyal TV audience and with others feeling disenfranchised.
So the man who built casinos and reality shows, as your sources wrap it up, he had now built a political movement.
An absolutely unprecedented trajectory. Showed the unexpected power of a public figure who'd spent decades cultivating brand recognition, media savvy, and this profound willingness to just challenge everything about politics as usual.
His past wasn't a liability. In that moment, with the public mood where it was, it might have been his greatest asset. Hashtag outro. And well, there you have it. From that privileged start in Queens, New York, to the top of Trump Tower, through the glitz and drama of reality TV, right to the threshold of the White House. Donald Trump's ascent is truly a story that rewrote every single rule in American politics.
It really did.
It challenges all our traditional ideas about what it takes to get that kind of political power today.
Your sources really light up a complex journey, don't they? Show how that ambition, that relentless branding, and just raw influence all converged, created this unique, often contradictory public figure.
His story really illustrates the huge impact of personality, of perception in our modern political world.
Yeah, it shows how a carefully cultivated public image can just bypass conventional political paths, resonate with a huge audience, often by tapping into frustrations, desires that the established players had totally overlooked.
Love him or hate him, you can't deny the story is one of ambition, branding, raw influence. It's a testament to the power of a compelling, unconventional persona.
And as we've explored today, the seeds for that political success were sown decades earlier. Through the business deals, the celebrity status, those often controversial public statements.
Every step, every TV appearance, every managed controversy, it all played a part in shaping the figure who would eventually capture the presidency.
And this deep dive really leaves us with a big question to think about, doesn't it? Given this journey, what does it tell us about the changing nature of public leadership? About the kind of influence that can shape a political movement now in this age saturated by media and celebrity culture?
Right. What shifts in society or in how we consume media made an unlikely ascent like this possible?
And could it be repeatable? How might future political figures use similar tactics, or maybe entirely new forms of public engagement and brand building to gain power?
Definitely something for you to mull over as you process these insights. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for diving in with us.
Until next, more complex. So let's start with option A, the acceptance scenario. Now, acceptance here doesn't mean a sudden ideological conversion or like a new embrace of traditional politics. Not at all.
No, not likely.
Our sources suggest this path might look more like a profound psychological fatigue, almost a form of burnout from relentless political combat.
That makes sense.
For some, the sheer cost of perpetual grievance, the emotional toll of constant perceived betrayal, might eventually outweigh the perceived reward of active resistance.
So a kind of quiet disengagement.
Yeah, imagine a quiet disengagement, almost a political PTSD, where active participation simply becomes too draining. It forces a retreat back into everyday life without necessarily abandoning core beliefs.
Right. It's a fading, not a flipping.
Exactly. This segment of the base might simply say, look, we fought the good fight, we gave it our all, and for now, it's too much.
They might still feel disillusioned, still believe the system is rigged, maybe.
Oh, almost certainly. But they would withdraw from active political life, perhaps focusing on local issues or just their personal lives.
So this is less about conceding defeat fairly and more about sheer exhaustion, a quiet resignation to a new reality.
Precisely. And then we have a far more volatile prospect, don't we? With option B, the radicalization trajectory.
Yes, this is the flip side. Here, the loss isn't accepted at all. It's seen as the ultimate proof of systemic corruption, maybe even an existential threat.
So pushing parts of the base towards increased extremism.
Definitely. The factors driving this would include viewing the loss as, an unforgivable betrayal by the deep state, further reinforcing their victimhood narrative. They're always working against us, and this proves it.
And Trump himself has framed this.
Right. Given how Trump has so powerfully framed himself as the only savior for America, his defeat, especially to someone perceived as another globalist elite, despite Musk's outsider appeal, which is interesting, could easily be interpreted by the most fervent as evidence that the entire system is irredeemably broken.
Which could lead to?
Well, necessitating more desperate, or maybe even extreme measures. We could see this manifest in further withdrawal from mainstream society, an embrace of even more fringe or conspiratorial ideologies, perhaps.
Or even action.
Or action.
Yeah.
A surge in local level disruption and obstruction, or even a push towards more confrontational, potentially violent forms of protest, reminiscent of events we've seen in the past, but perhaps more geographically dispersed this time and maybe more sustained. This faction wouldn't just feel angry. They'd feel profoundly betrayed and motivated by a sense of urgency to save the country themselves.
And finally, option C, which is perhaps the most intriguing, maybe even counterintuitive, the allegiance shift to Musk. Could a significant, even surprising segment of Trump's base actually shift their allegiance to Elon Musk? It seems unlikely on the surface, given their different backgrounds, right?
It does seem odd, yeah. But if we dig a bit deeper into the sources, what elements of Musk's persona, his rhetoric, or his perceived anti-establishment stance might appeal to these very specific voters?
Well, Musk often presents himself as an ultimate outsider, doesn't he? A disruptive force, someone actively fighting against perceived woke culture, bureaucratic inefficiencies, established norms.
That anti-establishment appeal is key, combined with his direct, often unfiltered communication style on X.
Which people liked about Trump, too.
Exactly. And his image as a powerful individual, unconstrained by traditional political etiquette, might resonate strongly with those who admired Trump's similar traits.
So there's a potential ideological bridge there.
Potentially, yeah. Perhaps around a shared disdain for the traditional political class, maybe a focus on perceived American strength through technological dominance, or just a common desire to fundamentally shake things up, even if the how differs quite a bit.
They might see Musk as a new kind of populist, one who promises a future that avoids the perceived decay of the present rather than clinging to a nostalgic past.
It's possible. A tech populist, maybe. Now, this raises a fascinating and immediate question about how the influential ecosystem of right-wing media will react to such a profound shift in the political landscape.
Oh yeah, the media reaction would be huge.
Our sources indicate we could anticipate a significant, even dramatic split within these outlets and personalities. Some might indeed pivot quite quickly, embracing a Musk-aligned narrative, seeing him as the new, effective champion of conservative or anti-establishment ideals.
Which ones?
Well, think of the segments of media that already champion free speech absolutism or are captivated by technological progress. They'd likely see Musk as their natural successor.
They'd hype his disruptor credentials.
Absolutely. This pivot might involve downplaying Trump's continued relevance and really hyping Musk's disruptor credentials. Conversely, other segments of right-wing media would almost certainly double down on a more fervent, unyielding Trumpism.
The ones still pushing the stolen election narrative.
Exactly. Those outlets, perhaps those deeply entrenched in that narrative or more reliant on grievance politics, would continue to push themes of deep state conspiracies, effectively rejecting Musk as not pure enough, or worse, as just another member of the globalist elite establishment.
So the media landscape gets even more fragmented.
Precisely. This internal division within right-wing media would make the information landscape even more fragmented, with intense competition for the loyalty of a disoriented and often angry base.
And let's not overlook the potential friction with rural voters, a core demographic for Trump. Musk, as the quintessential tech elite, embodies a culture that might be completely foreign, right? Or even explicitly antagonistic to many in Trump's rural base.
That's a really important point.
Why might they reject this tech elite culture, even if parts of his message appeal to others?
Well, Musk's identity is distinctly not everyman. His ventures are futuristic, high-tech, they're abstract concepts to those whose livelihoods are tied to traditional industries like farming, logging, or manufacturing.
Yeah.
The whole Silicon Valley ethos of rapid change, globalism, technological disruption that could feel like a direct threat to the traditional values, community structures, and way of life, often espoused by Trump's rural base.
So they see him as just another out-of-touch billionaire.
Pretty much. Disconnected from their everyday struggles. For example, while Musk talks about AI and Mars, many rural voters are concerned about jobs being outsourced or automated, the viability of small family farms, or just access to basic health care.
Things that feel much more immediate.
Exactly. The rhetoric of move fast and break things can sound like a threat to stability, not a promise of progress for these communities.
Yeah, I can see that.
The idea of trading in their pickup trucks for Teslas or their factory jobs for AI engineering, it just doesn't compute for many. Our hypothetical polling among disaffected rural voters suggests a deep skepticism towards any leader perceived as representing a coastal elite agenda, regardless of their political claims.
So pulling this together, what does this all mean for the immediate future? Synthesizing these reactions to a Trump loss to Musk, we could project the immediate aftermath to be characterized by significant short-term unrest.
Unrest seems likely, yes.
This would likely involve a resurgence of online campaigns, deeply reminiscent of a Stop the Steal 2.0 movement, attempting to delegitimize the election results, casting doubt on voting machines, rallying support for continued resistance.
All the things we saw before potentially amplified.
And we would also expect physical protests, perhaps mirroring past demonstrations, though potentially more widespread, maybe more sustained, or even volatile depending on how the loss is framed by the remaining loyalist media.
And looking further down the road, the long-term prognosis for this incredibly loyal group is critical. We would likely see significant fragmentation of Trump's loyalists.
Fragmentation, not consolidation.
Right. Instead of coalescing around a new leader or a unified agenda, his base would genuinely splinter. This would lead to the formation of a smaller, potentially angrier and more isolated faction within the political landscape.
And the implications of that?
Well, the implications of such a highly concentrated, disaffected group are considerable. They would remain a potent, if diminished, force, capable of disruptive actions, maintaining a strong sense of grievance, and potentially becoming a permanent, alienated opposition force within American politics.
Where would they even get their information?
They would likely gravitate towards increasingly fringe media, forming their own insular communities, further deepening existing societal divides, and making political reconciliation incredibly difficult. Imagine a dedicated hyper-online community, constantly reinforcing their narratives of victimhood and betrayal, occasionally spilling into real-world disruptive events.
Okay, now let's zoom out. Beyond the individual supporters, what would a Trump loss, especially to an outsider like Elon Musk, mean for the Republican Party as a whole? This scenario could trigger an existential crisis for the GOP, truly putting them at a crossroads. We're talking about two stark outcomes, aren't we? Either a total collapse of the party structure as we know it, where its traditional coalitions and principles just unravel, or a radical reinvention around entirely new ideological pillars.
And a particularly striking aspect here is the potential for significant shifts in party financing, which, let's be honest, is often the very lifeblood of political movements.
Money talks, right.
Always. Powerful GOP donors might very well abandon the Trump-era politics, viewing it as a losing strategy or maybe just a dead end for the party's future.
So they pivot.
They could then swiftly pivot their support towards Musk-friendly candidates, eager to inject their capital into a new direction for the party's resources and influence. These donors, often more aligned with big business, technological advancement, perhaps less culturally conservative stances, might see Musk as a pragmatic path to future power.
And that starves the old guard.
This financial redirection would starve traditional Trumpian factions of essential resources, forcing them either to adapt, embrace a new narrative, or simply wither from lack of funding.
And it's not just about money. It's about people, specifically younger Republicans. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, how a figure like Musk might appeal to a demographic often seen as disengaged or even disillusioned with traditional politics.
That's a fascinating angle. His focus on free speech, often framed in almost absolutist terms and tied directly to his control over X, that resonates remarkably strongly with the younger generation that grew up online and deeply values open discourse, even when it's controversial.
But it's more than just free speech, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. Beyond that, his emphasis on technological innovation, from AI to space exploration, speaks to a forward-looking demographic. They're perhaps less interested in relitigating traditional conservative battles and more captivated by future possibilities.
So policies around AI, crypto.
Exactly. Policies related to artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency adoption, advanced manufacturing, scientific advancement, they could resonate with them in a way that traditional culture wars simply don't. They're seeking policies that address the challenges and opportunities of the 21st century, not just, nostalgic calls for a bygone era.
That demographic shift could be incredibly powerful.
It could, pushing the GOP towards reinvention, even if it means alienating some of their older, more traditional voters.
This scenario could truly ignite a civil war within the Republican Party, couldn't it? It feels almost inevitable.
Absolutely. Our sources strongly suggest we would see a profound and bitter conflict between the entrenched old MAGA loyalists and an emerging new tech-right faction.
Old MAGA versus new tech, right?
Yeah. The old MAGA wing, deeply committed to Trump's specific brand of populist nationalism, resistance to perceived globalism, and often anti-establishment sentiment, would likely view Musk's rise with deep suspicion.
They wouldn't trust him.
They might see him as just another globalist elite, maybe a threat to their traditional values, or simply not their guy. They would cling fiercely to the past, to the grievance politics that Trump championed, and resist any perceived dilution of their movement, fighting tooth and nail in primaries and internal party battles. Their focus would remain inward, pretty much, on domestic cultural battles and protectionism.
While the new tech-right faction would be eager to embrace Musk's vision and integrate technology-driven, perhaps more libertarian principles, they're looking squarely forward, not backward.
Precisely. This new faction would prioritize technological advancement, advocate for radical deregulation to foster innovation, and likely adopt a more libertarian approach to social issues, particularly those related to online speech, digital freedoms, maybe even privacy in an AI-driven world.
They'd see Musk as a visionary.
Yeah, as a visionary leader who understands the future economy, the role of technology in society, and the imperative of American leadership in space and AI. We'd hear voices, for example, like that of a young conservative influencer from our source material, who might proclaim, "I think Musk speaks for the future, not the past. He gets that we need to build, not just argue."
Wow, that really captures the divide.
It does. It clearly illustrates the generational and ideological chasm that would open up, making it incredibly difficult for the Republican Party to find common ground or a unified message. The party would be torn between its populist nationalist base and a new technologically focused entrepreneurial wing, leading to a profound identity crisis and bitter internal power struggles for control over the party apparatus, its message, and its future.
Okay, so beyond the shifting sands of political loyalty and party structure, this scenario inevitably spills over into the very fabric of our digital lives, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Because both Trump and Musk have, in their own unique ways, built immense empires on social media. Trump with Truth Social, and Musk, of course, with X, formerly Twitter. What happens when these two collide head-on after an election where one defeats the other? We're predicting nothing short of a significant tech platform civil war if Trump loses. What would that actually look like?
Well, the immediate reaction from Truth Social, Trump's platform, would likely be to loudly declare X compromised, biased against conservative voices, maybe even complicit in election rigging.
Fueling distrust.
Exactly. This narrative would be pushed hard to fuel distrust and attempt to rally Trump's remaining supporters to his platform, framing X and, by extension, Musk as an enemy of true free speech for conservatives.
But would Trump's platform actually grow?
Probably not. Simultaneously, Trump's overall digital empire, which relies heavily on his personal brand and direct communication with his base, could shrink dramatically, as focus shifts to Musk as the victorious political leader.
And Musk-backed creators.
Right. And as Musk-backed creators and narratives potentially dominate the landscape of political content creation on X, Trump's online influence would inevitably diminish.
So it's about who controls the narrative.
It is. This isn't just about platform loyalty. It's about who controls the narrative, who sets the agenda, and who commands the most attention in the digital public square, which in this scenario would decisively shift towards Musk.
And this goes far beyond just the platforms themselves, doesn't it? The very nature of online political discourse would be fundamentally altered.
Absolutely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this election scenario would undoubtedly accelerate the influence of AI-generated political media.
Deepfakes and all that.
And more, leading to unprecedented challenges in distinguishing truth from fabrication. We're not just talking about crude image manipulation anymore. We're considering advancements. Well, things like generative adversarial networks, GANs, and diffusion models that can create photorealistic video of non-existent events.
With accurate voices and everything.
Complete with accurate lip syncing, nuanced expressions, and perfectly synthesized voices. The technical challenge isn't just spotting the fake. It's the sheer volume and speed at which these can be produced, overwhelming verification efforts, and fundamentally eroding public trust in visual and audio evidence itself.
That's terrifying, intensifying the misinformation wars.
To an almost unimaginable degree. Furthermore, Elon Musk's inherent centralized control over political discourse through the algorithms of X becomes a critical, almost chilling factor.
His personal influence on the algorithm.
His personal philosophies, his biases, his whims could subtly or explicitly influence what content is promoted or suppressed. This includes everything from algorithmic promotion of certain narratives, to shadow banning accounts, to shaping personalized feeds that reinforce or challenge a user's existing beliefs.
Which has huge implications.
Enormous. The implications for free speech, information dissemination, and the very integrity of public debate are enormous, raising serious questions about the balance of power and the sanctity of online information.
So, if this scenario plays out, what does it truly mean for how we consume politics and how political ideas are even communicated?
A Musk win could genuinely signal the profound death of legacy political communication as we've known it.
The death of legacy communication. What does that mean practically?
We're talking about traditional news cycles, formal debates, lengthy analytical pieces being pushed further into obsolescence, relegated to niche audiences.
Replaced by.
These conventional forms of discourse would likely be completely replaced by what we might call meme wars and live stream debates as the primary, even dominant modes of political engagement.
Wow. Meme wars and live streams.
Yeah. This fundamentally alters how political ideas are disseminated and received by the public. Policy arguments might be distilled into viral images that convey a message in seconds.
Complex issues debated how?
Debated in rapid fire, unfiltered live streams by influencers or even the candidates themselves, rather than structured town halls or formal interviews.
So it prioritizes virality over nuance.
Absolutely. This shift would prioritize virality, immediate emotional impact, and direct, unmediated communication over nuanced discussion, potentially leading to a shallower, but far more pervasive and constantly evolving form of political engagement.
Thinking about a Musk presidency now, it would likely mean dramatic shifts in economic priorities, wouldn't it? What would that look like? Because we're not talking about the same kind of deregulation we've seen before.
Precisely. We'd see deregulation, but it would be distinctly different from the traditional nationalist deregulation seen under Trump. That often focused on rolling back environmental protections or financial regulations to boost specific, often legacy industries.
So how would Musk's be different?
Instead, it would be through a distinct tech libertarian lens. This means a zealous focus on removing regulatory hurdles for nascent and cutting-edge technologies.
Like AI, biotech.
Exactly. Explicitly designed to foster rapid innovation in areas like advanced AI, biotechnology, space colonization, perhaps even human augmentation.
And in practical terms.
Well, this could involve unprecedented tax incentives for tech startups, radically streamlined regulatory approvals for new technological products, or even a completely hands-off approach to emerging digital economies, like cryptocurrency and NFTs. The overarching goal would be to unleash technological progress at an accelerated pace, even if it means significantly disrupting established industries, challenging existing ethical frameworks, or creating entirely new forms of economic inequality.
So, no more talk about coal or steel being the backbone of America. It sounds like a completely different national agenda, truly prioritizing a future that many might still find abstract.
Absolutely. What's fascinating here is that artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency, and Mars colonization would receive policy front row seats, almost unparalleled in their national priority.
These aren't just concepts, they're policy priorities.
Right. They reflect Musk's personal ventures, his grand vision for humanity's future, and would become central to national policy. AI would likely see massive federal investment, perhaps even a national AI development mandate akin to historical infrastructure projects, alongside policy frameworks aimed at accelerating its development and integration across virtually all sectors.
And crypto.
Cryptocurrency could move from the fringes to a more mainstream regulatory environment, perhaps even being embraced at a national level for certain transactions, or becoming integrated into federal financial systems.
And Mars
colonization and space exploration would transform from a scientific endeavor into a core national strategic priority, potentially with unprecedented resource allocation, perhaps even to the Space Force budget that begins to rival traditional defense spending.
That's a huge contrast to previous administrations.
It is. We would see the aggressive downplaying of fossil fuel industries, not necessarily through outright bans, but by redirecting massive federal subsidies and research grants toward renewable energy and electric vehicle infrastructure.
So basically starving the old industries.
Essentially starve traditional energy sectors of the capital and policy support they currently rely on, making them increasingly uncompetitive without direct mandates. This would signal a major foundational shift in national resource allocation and industrial focus, fundamentally altering the entire economic landscape.
That's a huge pivot, a radical departure. So what happens to Trump's populist America First economics, which were all about protecting domestic industries and jobs, often through tariffs and reshoring?
It would likely be sidelined, if not outright abandoned, in favor of these Silicon Valley-centric strategies.
Because their focus is so different.
Exactly. Trump's America First was fundamentally about protectionism, bringing manufacturing jobs back, shoring up established industries, often appealing directly to a working-class base. Musk's economic vision would be about creating entirely new industries, fostering disruptive innovation, and competing on a truly global scale through technological superiority.
Which could cause backlash.
Almost certainly. This pivot would almost certainly cause significant backlash from working-class Trump supporters who would feel their economic priorities de-emphasized or ignored in favor of new, tech-driven policies that don't directly benefit them and might even displace them through automation,
leading to new class divides.
Potentially intense new class divides or political alignments, with a growing chasm between those who benefit from the tech economy and those who feel left behind by its rapid advancements.
And trade policy, Trump's tariffs.
We could also anticipate the rapid breakdown of old trade policies that Trump aggressively pursued. A Musk administration might seek to establish new international economic frameworks focused on global innovation, open data flows, technological collaboration, rather than protectionist measures.
So not just a policy shift, but a cultural one too.
A profound cultural and economic reorientation, yes.
Trump's foreign policy was often described as chaotic, but aggressively nationalist. How would the world react if Musk takes the helm and Trump fades from the global stage? Let's start with NATO, an alliance Trump constantly challenged.
NATO. Yeah, an alliance that Trump frequently criticized, questioned the relevance of, even threatened to withdraw from. They might very well breathe a significant sigh of relief under a Musk presidency.
Relief? Why?
Musk is unpredictable too.
He is, but his focus tends to be on technological advancement, global challenges like climate change and AI risk, and an overarching, almost aspirational vision for humanity. Not the transactional, often antagonistic approach Trump took to traditional alliance.
So a return to more predictability.
Potentially.
Oh.
Or at least collaboration. A renewed emphasis on shared technological development for defense and global problem solving, rather than constant renegotiation of commitments or demands for financial reparations. Allies might see a shift from a transactional relationship to one based on shared goals in innovation and future security.
And what about China? They're a major global player in the tech world and a strategic competitor. How would they respond to a U.S. leader who embodies technological innovation?
China would undoubtedly be forced to profoundly reassess its tech strategy. With a U.S. leader who not only champions but also embodies technological innovation and who openly prioritizes areas like space dominance, AI leadership, advanced computing, the global tech race would intensify dramatically.
So China faces a new challenge.
A new, direct, and incredibly formidable challenge from a U.S. administration singularly focused on accelerating its own capabilities. This raises an important question. How would this global tech race intensify competition, not just in R&D, but also in standard setting, IP protection, control over critical supply chains,
and geopolitical influence?
Even geopolitical influence in emerging technology spheres. We'd likely see China doubling down on its domestic innovation, potentially seeking new tech alliances with other nations to counterbalance U.S. advancements.
And Russia, which benefited from Trump's often sympathetic rhetoric and his willingness to question traditional alliances, would likely see a significant shift, right?
Yeah, Russia could indeed lose a key rhetorical ally with Trump's departure. Trump's stance often created an opening for Russia on the global stage, arguably weakening Western unity against Russian aggression and influence operations.
And Musk wouldn't offer that.
A Musk presidency, while perhaps not overtly hostile in a traditional diplomatic sense, would likely be far less accommodating, more focused on future-oriented challenges, pushing Russia to reassess its own geopolitical dynamics and influence operations without the perceived benefit of a sympathetic ear in the White House.
So less engagement, less leverage for Russia.
Potentially. Musk's focus on technological progress in space could mean a redirection of U.S. strategic focus away from traditional land-based or European conflicts, potentially leaving Russia with less direct U.S. engagement, but also less perceived leverage, right?
Right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, a Musk presidency would undoubtedly intensify the space race, wouldn't it? With Mars colonization and orbital infrastructure taking on unprecedented strategic importance, this isn't just about science anymore.
That's absolutely right. Space would transform into a paramount domain of national security, economic opportunity, and geopolitical competition,
forcing other countries to react.
Countries would be forced to recalibrate their own space programs and national budgets, potentially leading to new international partnerships for deep space missions. Imagine a multinational effort towards Mars. Or, conversely, heightened rivalries over orbital resources, lunar territories, maybe asteroid mining rights.
So the focus shifts dramatically.
The focus shifts from merely launching satellites to building permanent human presence beyond Earth, turning space into a new frontier for power projection, resource acquisition, and even the establishment of new legal and governance frameworks for off-world activities. This reflects Musk's own long-term vision of making humanity a multiplanetary species, now potentially backed by the full weight of U.S. policy.
So what does this all mean for the world's perception of America and the global order itself? How does the world see this?
Musk is unpredictable, certainly, but undeniably forward-thinking. Allies and enemies alike would have to fundamentally reset their policies around a new paradigm of tech dominance.
Adapting to a tech-focused U.S.
They would be adapting to a U.S. leader who prioritizes innovation, entrepreneurial spirit, and future-oriented goals over traditional geopolitical maneuvering or entrenched ideological alliances. The world would watch America redefine itself, perhaps not through traditional military might or diplomatic alliances alone, but through its unparalleled technological leadership and its ambitious vision for humanity's future in space and beyond.
Leading to a global reevaluation.
Absolutely. This would necessitate a global reevaluation of strategies, alliances, and even national priorities in response to a U.S. that is truly looking towards the next frontier, potentially creating new global fault lines and alliances based on technological prowess and future-oriented agendas.
So what does this all mean? Summing up our deep dive. If Trump were to lose to Elon Musk, what does our exploration suggest would be the major ripple effects across America and the world? First, Trump's political empire would likely fracture, wouldn't it? Sending his loyal base down paths of either psychological acceptance through exhaustion, further radicalization towards extremism, or, surprisingly, maybe a calculated shift in allegiance to Musk.
That seems right. A splintering.
Second, the Republican Party would face an existential choice. Either crumble under the immense weight of its internal divisions or adapt dramatically, embracing a new tech libertarian identity driven by younger voters and shifting donor loyalties.
A real identity crisis.
Third, online politics would be fundamentally reshaped by powerful algorithms and rapidly advancing AI, leading to an intense...
Welcome to The Deep Dive. We're the show where we take a whole stack of sources, articles, all that cutting-edge research, and really try to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge. The goal. Get you informed fast.
And today, we're diving into something that, well, until just now, basically, felt like science fiction.
Exactly. Something pretty unthinkable has just happened, at least in the context of this deep dive.
It really has. We're looking at a huge shift, an event that's just completely reshaped, expectations, norms, globally.
It's a total rethink of what's possible at the very top.
A fundamental reevaluation,
And what we're talking about is this. Elon Musk has won the U.S. presidency. Running as an independent candidate. Just let that sink in for a second.
Right.
The world is absolutely watching, holding its breath.
Yeah.
Wall Street. It's buzzing. I mean, a mix of crazy excitement and real fear.
And Washington.
Washington is frankly panicking.
Yeah.
Just scrambling to figure out a political map they don't even recognize anymore.
Yeah.
And if you're like most people, just trying to figure this all out, you're probably asking, okay, what does this actually mean for me, for my life, my job, my future?
And that's the key question, isn't it? That's really the mission for us today, to pull out the most crucial insights, the realistic effects of a Musk presidency.
We're looking at everything, right? Policy changes, Silicon Valley's influence.
And the shifts in global power, even, the basic nature of democracy itself.
Okay, let's really unpack this then. We're about to dive deep into, a completely unprecedented political landscape.
Let's do it.
So first up, that political earthquake, his victory. Our sources are really clear. It didn't just shake things up, it shattered everything. That's the quote.
Shattered everything.
Yeah, this wasn't just, another election upset. We've seen those. This was different. He bypassed the whole traditional political machine, ran as an independent.
Which feels almost impossible.
Right. In our system. So what does it really mean when one person, totally unaligned with the Democrats or Republicans, can actually win the presidency?
It's fascinating because, for decades, right? The whole story has been shaped by those two parties. They dictate who's even seen as, a serious candidate. Musk getting in as an independent, it just challenges the whole idea of political identity in the U.S. It's a win from outside the system.
Totally outside.
And it suggests maybe a really profound level of voter frustration, disillusionment, maybe even desperation with traditional politics. Like, people are willing to try something truly radical.
We've seen protest votes before, though. Is this just that?
I think it feels different, more like a deliberate demolition, not just an upset. It speaks to a real breakdown in trust, trust in the institutions, the gatekeepers. People aren't just asking for reform anymore.
You're demanding disruption.
Exactly. Outright disruption.
Demolition, that feels right. Which leads to the big question. Is this just him? A one-off? A Musk anomaly? Or does it actually open the door for a whole new era? Independents, maybe celebrities, other tech moguls running.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
If the party machine isn't essential anymore, how does that change how people even engage with politics? Is it more direct now? More personality-driven? Maybe less about ideology?
Well, think about the barriers historically.
Right.
Funding, media, just getting on the ballot, huge hurdles for independence. And yet, he broke through. That quote you mentioned really nails it. He didn't just beat the system, he bypassed it entirely.
Bypassed it.
It's not incremental change. It's structural. It implies those old paths to power the fundraising, the endorsements, the party structures, they became secondary.
Secondary to what then?
To this new kind of direct appeal. Using digital platforms in ways we just haven't seen at this scale before. It suggests maybe the public is tired of the established brands. They want something that feels, more authentic, more disruptive, certainly.
And here's where it gets really interesting, I think. This victory, it signals the absolute death of traditional campaigns.
Yeah, the sources are blunt.
Totally. Influencers, live streams, memes, tech platforms, that's what decided it. Not the usual TV ads or the big rallies. It's like the opposite of everything we thought we knew.
It is.
So what does that mean for how political messages even get made now? Or consumed?
It shows a really deep shift in, well, everything. How messages are made, how they're sent out, and how people actually take them in. It's a clear move towards, let's call it, direct-to-consumer politics.
Direct-to-consumer. Like selling sneakers.
Kind of, yeah. The traditional gatekeepers, the big news networks, the pundits, their influence seems to have just cratered. It's all about direct digital engagement now.
Okay, but what does that do to politics?
Well, it has huge implications for how information gets checked, how stories are built, how fast they spread. Think about it, a viral meme versus, say, a detailed policy paper.
Night and day.
Totally different ecosystem.
So, if virality and just raw engagement matter more than, careful campaigning, what are the consequences for political discussion?
That's a critical point.
It makes me worry about information literacy. Like, how do you, the voter, sort fact from fiction when the whole system is built for speed and emotion, not nuance or accuracy?
And misinformation, disinformation campaigns.
Exactly. The tools that connect directly can also spread lies incredibly effectively, creating these echo chambers.
Almost impossible to break out of.
Right. It just changes the whole feel of political talk. Faster, more broken up, maybe more volatile.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the immediate fallout in Washington and, beyond, it's huge.
And challenging.
Yeah, so our sources say both parties, Republicans and Democrats, are facing basically an identity crisis, an existential one.
Because their whole model is based on fighting each other.
Precisely. For decades, they've defined themselves mostly by not being the other party. An independent wins, it shatters their whole purpose. They have to ask, what do we even stand for now? Who do we represent? How are we even relevant?
It's like the operating system just crashed.
That's a great way to put it. Washington's OS just crashed.
So, does that identity crisis just mean internal chaos for them? Or does it actually freeze up Congress? You mentioned widespread refusal to cooperate.
Well, the sources suggest it could happen surprisingly fast. Imagine a president with no real party trying to get laws passed.
When both parties are reeling.
Yeah.
And maybe actively hostile because their world just got turned upside down.
It's a recipe for gridlock. Or at least a radical shakeup of how laws get made. We're talking intense political instability, reevaluation.
The old lines are blurred.
Right. Creating this vacuum could be paralysis or maybe an opening for completely new alliances, new movements.
Could parties actually split?
Right.
Or rebrand?
It's possible. They have to figure out how to operate when the system doesn't revolve around them anymore. It raises this really important question. How does a system built on party loyalty adapt when the president avoids it?
The answer is going to shape government for years.
Absolutely.
For years.
Okay, moving on from the political earthquake. Let's talk about Silicon Valley actually in the White House.
Right.
Sources paint a clear picture. First time ever, a tech billionaire is commander-in-chief. This isn't just a new leader, it's a totally different kind of thinking, a different worldview running the country. We're told to expect a cabinet full of engineers, futurists, and crypto experts.
Which signals this unprecedented blurring of lines between the private tech world and actual government administration.
Okay, pros and cons there, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
On one hand, you could get incredible efficiency, innovative problem solving, a data-first mindset for really complex challenges.
It's like cybersecurity, infrastructure.
Exactly. They might cut through red tape with an engineering approach, potentially bypass decades of bureaucratic sludge. Okay, but the other hand, what about, actual political experience, diplomacy, understanding people, not just systems?
That's the big counterpoint. Does a cabinet of engineers lack that? Governing isn't just optimizing code. It's managing diverse interests, ethical gray areas, things algorithms don't easily solve.
And what does that do to the culture in government agencies? The bureaucracy itself?
Does it set a precedent? Leaders chosen for tech skills over political ones, over the ability to, compromise, build consensus.
Are we swapping political science for data science at the top?
That's a stark way to put it, but yeah. And that leads right into government digitization.
Ah, yes. Massive digitization. Even AI and policymaking. Automating bureaucracy.
On a scale we haven't imagined. The promise is clear, right? Efficiency. Cutting red tape with algorithms, not just rules. Reducing human error.
Sounds great if you've ever waited in line at the DMV.
Exactly.
But it opens up a huge can of worms. Algorithmic bias. If AI makes policy, whose values get coded in?
And transparency. How do you explain a decision made inside a neural network black box? Accountability becomes incredibly tricky. Who's responsible if an automated system screws up?
Yeah, who do you even complain to?
And how do citizens interact with this automated government? Do you lose that human connection? What about data privacy, cybersecurity? Every piece of data, every process is a target.
We need a whole new level of security and trust.
The ethical questions around AI and government are massive, and this would force them right out into the open. We need answers. Fact.
And then the elephant in the room, corporate access. Sources say Musk's own companies Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink get unprecedented access to federal infrastructure. This is where it gets really controversial for a lot of people.
It immediately raises that fundamental question for democracy, doesn't it? Is this genuine innovation for the public good? A smart synergy?
Or is it just corporate control? Self-interest driving policy?
The potential for conflicts of interest is just enormous. Imagine a bill on space funding. Normally, NASA lobbies, maybe Boeing. Now, the president's own company, SpaceX, is right there.
Every decision, every contract, every rule change could be seen through that lens. Does it benefit his companies?
It could totally erode the checks and balances meant to prevent that kind of power concentration.
It feels like a really slippery slope. What about other tech companies? How do they compete if the president's firms have that inside track?
Does it stifle innovation from others? Lead to accusations of cronyism, where public service and private gain just blur together?
Trust in government could plummet if people think policy is just about enriching specific companies. It's a huge ethical tightrope.
And moving to specific policies, our sources point to some radical changes. First, crypto. Legalized and regulated.
That's huge. Not just embracing tech, but potentially reshaping global finance, right? Challenging banks, changing international money flows.
Creating totally new kinds of digital money and business. Then, universal internet, Starlink back, nationwide.
Okay, on one hand, that sounds amazing. Bridging the digital divide. Access for everyone, everywhere. Education, jobs, healthcare.
Huge potential upside.
But it also centralizes control of critical infrastructure. What about censorship? Privacy. Dependence on one company for something so vital.
Definitely a double-edged sword.
So,
Then there's AI education and workforce reskilling programs.
a big priority. Makes sense.
Yeah, recognizing work is changing fast. Trying to get the workforce ready for AI, for automation, mitigate that job displacement we need to talk more about. It's not just coding, it's fundamentally retooling people for an automated future.
And finally, space policy. Central to the national agenda.
Not just more NASA money, a whole reprioritization, shifting focus from Earth issues to cosmic goals.
Massive investment in space exploration.
Well,
Resources. Colonization.
It fundamentally changes the country's long-term goals, its identity even, redefining national interest way beyond Earth's atmosphere.
So with all this tech disruption, what about the economy? Sources introduced this term, Muskonomics.
Very Muskonomic.
Sounds like a whole new paradigm. What are the pillars?
First, tech-driven deregulation. Not just cutting rules, but actively removing barriers to tech progress, AI, autonomous cars, biotech.
The idea is faster innovation.
Exactly. But the risk is fewer consumer protections, maybe environmental rules, labor standards, all sacrificed for speed.
Okay, what else?
Hyper-automation. Not just factory robots. Automation everywhere, across all sectors, driven by AI. Aiming for maximum efficiency, productivity.
Sounds good for growth. But the social impact? Jobs.
A huge reshuffling of the labor market, then green energy expansion. Think Tesla power grid, big solar incentives.
An aggressive move away from fossil fuels.
Definitely. Huge push for renewables. Good for the environment, energy independence maybe, but incredibly disruptive for coal, oil, gas industries.
And their workers.
Absolutely. And tied to that, ending fossil fuel subsidies, that would send immediate shockwaves.
Wow. And the last pillar.
Federal investment in Mars-related industries. This is maybe the wildest one.
Going beyond Earth economics.
Totally. A long-term, high-risk, high-reward vision, not just science, but building a whole new industrial base around space. Manufacturing, resources, logistics, even terraforming tech.
Okay, so you put it all together. Deregulation, hyperautomation, green energy, Mars money. What does Muskonomics mean for the average person, the broader economy?
That's the crucial question. And the sources, they paint a pretty stark picture of winners and losers.
Okay, who wins?
Pretty clear. Tech startups, they'd likely see tons of funding, friendly rules. Crypto holders, their assets get legitimized, maybe stabilized. And the renewable energy sector, boom times, with all that government cash and support.
And the losers.
Equally clear, and this is where the social impact really lands, traditional unions. Under immense pressure from automation, AI reshaping workforces, maybe weakening bargaining power.
Coal and oil industries.
Decline dramatically. Subsidies gone, green energy pushed hard, big job losses, economic pain in those regions, and legacy automakers.
Struggling to keep up with the EV and autonomous shift, especially when the president's own company leads the charge.
Exactly. It's a stark reallocation, a fundamental restructuring almost. The winners align perfectly with the president's vision. The losers are the old models being disrupted.
It makes you really worry about the social fallout, that divide. How do you support or retrain millions of displaced workers on that scale, that speed?
What kind of safety nets do you need? The sources don't pull punches. It would be a time of major economic upheaval for a lot of families, a lot of communities.
Which brings us to that Wall Street versus Main Street thing.
Right, the potential divide. Sources suggest Wall Street may rally, may be big time.
Markets love innovation talk, deregulation.
For sure. They might pour money into AI, crypto, space tech, seeing huge new opportunities, valuations could soar, lots of investor optimism.
But the flip side, and this hits you, the listener, directly. Main Street could struggle with job displacement.
And it's not some far-off future fear. The source says AI isn't coming, it's already here.
Right now. Immediate impact.
So while Wall Street cheers the automated future, everyday people face their jobs disappearing or just becoming obsolete because of the tech.
It highlights that K-shaped recovery idea, right? Widening inequality.
Exactly. Capital wins, maybe a small tech elite wins big, while huge parts of the workforce face serious challenges. And it's not just factory jobs. Admin roles, customer service, even some professional jobs could be automated.
The social consequences of that disconnect between market hype and real jobs are huge. We need totally new thinking on education, welfare, economic policy, or face massive societal unrest.
The question isn't if jobs change, it's how many, how fast, and how to get people ready.
Okay, let's shift gears from the domestic economy to foreign policy. A Musk presidency means America's world approach enters a strange new phase, according to the sources. And the core, space diplomacy, collaborating with allies, not just on military stuff, but on Mars colonization.
It's a radical shift. Alliances usually form around history, military pacts, economics. Now, shared goals beyond Earth could become key.
Nations working together to build on Mars, develop deep space tech, instead of just fighting over borders here.
It redefines alliances based on tech cooperation, exploration, not just security deals. It's the different kind of soft power projected outwards.
It's kind of mind-blowing. What does that do to places like the UN? Built around nations, Earth issues, do they become irrelevant or adapt?
Good question. And could it lead to an off-world arms race? Fighting over moon resources, Martian territory, extending conflicts into space?
Or could it actually unify us? A common goal beyond Earth, shifting focus away from our squabbles here.
The implications for global governance are massive and mostly unknown territory.
What's fascinating, though, while space diplomacy sounds cooperative, tensions with China over tech are set to escalate.
Right, significantly. With a tech billionaire in charge, the main competition becomes tech supremacy, not just military power. The chip race, the AI race, already hot, would likely hit fever pitch.
So chips and AI aren't just economic tools anymore, they're battlegrounds, national security assets.
Absolutely. The U.S. under Musk would likely double down, push hard to dominate those areas, see it as vital for survival.
What's the risk of that tech Cold War turning hotter? Trade wars, cyber attacks, proxy fights over rare minerals.
How does it affect global supply chains? Trade. The internet itself, it's incredibly high stakes. The chips are literally on the table.
And diplomatically.
Yeah.
A very unconventional approach is projected, using ex-Twitter as a primary diplomatic platform.
Yeah, that would shock the traditionalists. A huge shift from careful, nuanced, often private diplomacy
to what? Direct, instant, often unfiltered public messages on a global stage.
Pretty much. Advantages. Speed, directness, bypassing media filters, maybe engaging people directly, seems transparent.
Disadvantages. Huge risk of misinterpretation in 280 characters. No nuance for complex issues. Impulsive tweets causing crises.
A single badly worded post could ignite something serious. Its diplomacy is a high wire act, replacing subtlety with raw speed.
So the big picture shift in foreign policy, sources say, is innovation diplomacy over a military-first policy.
Right. A strategic change. Projecting U.S. influence through tech leadership, joint ventures, big projects like Mars, not just military intervention or arms deals.
Redefining global strength, from force to ingenuity.
There was that quote from TechCrunch you found.
Oh yeah, that really stuck with me. The U.S. is no longer just a country, it's a prototype.
Powerful, isn't it? Captures that vision of America as experimental, forward-looking, exporting tech solutions, disruptive ideas, a blueprint for the future.
Leading by innovating, not just by having the biggest military. America as a global lab.
So how does the world react to this prototype nation? Sources give specific reactions. Europe, cautious optimism.
Makes sense. They like tech progress, climate action.
Yeah.
Aligns with the green energy AI stuff.
But they also value multilateralism, careful diplomacy, democratic norms, might clash with the speed, the social media diplomacy. They'd welcome the innovation, maybe worry about the democracy part.
Russia, expected to show increased cyber aggression.
Given Musk's history with Starlink in Ukraine, his outspokenness, a tech-focused U.S. might seem like a direct threat. Could mean more hacking, election interference, infrastructure attacks, escalating an existing conflict.
India, a closer tech partnership.
It's perfectly. India's growing tech sector, space ambitions, digital focus aligns really well with Musk's projected priorities. More collaboration on AI, space, digital projects, deeper ties based on tech synergy.
And China, highly threatened. Intensifies its own chip in AI race.
Completely logical. They already see it as a fierce competition for global dominance. A U.S. president embodying tech ambition, that's a direct rival. They'd get even more aggressive, pursuing self-sufficiency and leadership in AI and chips.
Each region reacts based on its own interests. A Musk presidency forces everyone to recalibrate.
Definitely.
Okay, beyond politics and economics. The culture shock. A Musk presidency means big changes for American identity. Sources predict meme governance becomes normal.
Meme governance. Just pause on that phrase.
Right. Government communication shifts to X, live streams, public polls even.
It's a total transformation of public discourse. Civic engagement. Politics gets faster, more interactive, way more informal.
Could engage younger people maybe.
Yeah.
On platforms they use.
Potentially. Bridge that gap. But the downside. Trivializing serious policy. Governing by popularity contest. Fleeting trends. What about protecting minorities if it's all just polls?
It's genuinely jarring. Are we talking like Doge memes for economic policy, national security decisions via Twitter poll? My inner traditionalist is screaming.
Yeah.
What does it do to journalism? Expert analysis. If policy comes via memes, where's the space for in-depth reporting, nuanced critique? The Fourth Estate's role.
Does it just amplify noise? Loudest voices win? Drowning out slower, more considered information? It's a bewildering new world for how we connect with government.
And political influencers getting cabinet-level relevance. That's a whole new power dynamic. Often unsettling.
And this cultural shift, it would inevitably deepen polarization, specifically between the future believers and traditionalists.
A new fault line. Not just left versus right, but your stance on tech progress itself. Disruption. Humanity's future.
Yeah, a split between those embracing the speed and tech and those feeling loss. Loss of norms, institutions.
How does that play out day to day? Beyond politics. Do communities split? Tech zones versus traditional zones, new protests against automation, cultural segregation even.
It's a really visceral division, could make finding common ground even harder.
And education. Social impacts.
Education shifts towards STEM plus AI, clearly. Prioritizing skills for the future economy.
But maybe at the expense of humanities.
Yeah.
Arts, critical thinking, history, empathy taught differently. What skills do we value most?
And online, expect fierce battles, conspiracy theories versus technocracy.
A fight over truth itself. Authority, societal control. Who defines reality when information is so fragmented, trust is low?
Is it the technocrats with data? Or alternative narratives going viral? It's a battle for society's story playing out online.
And deepening that generational divide. Boomers versus Gen Zooskites.
Fundamental differences in values, communication, worldview. Younger generations might find meme governance exciting. Older ones, deeply skeptical, fearing loss of value, safeguards, common sense.
It really makes you think. How do you, listening now, navigate these currents? Personally, professionally, as society changes so fast. Okay, finally. How does all this hit democracy itself? We know Musk has criticized bureaucracy, old institutions, even democracy's slow pace.
Right, which leads to critical questions.
First, Does he accelerate decisions too fast for checks and balances?
That's a huge one for you to think about. Democratic systems have friction built in. Checks, balances, processes. They're slow on purpose.
To ensure deliberation, protect minorities.
That allows scrutiny.
Exactly. If decisions get rushed for efficiency, led by someone who prizes speed, what happens to due process, public input, oversight? It's speed versus democratic safeguards. One might get sacrificed.
And related, will AI and direct voting apps redefine democracy?
On the surface, direct voting apps sound great. More participation, instant feedback, direct democracy, empowering people. But the risks: manipulation, security hacks. Imagine an election decided by a hacked app.
And the tyranny of the majority. If every decision is a real-time poll, what about complex policy, long-term vision, minority rights? It challenges the whole idea of representative democracy, deliberation.
So what are the big risks outlined in the sources?
First, tech overreach. Could be excessive surveillance, algorithmic social control, tech creeping into every corner of life without real consent or ethical rules. Society optimized, maybe, but human freedom, secondary.
And privacy erosion. Almost inevitable, right? With total government digitization.
If every interaction, every policy, every bit of your life is digitized, interconnected, privacy could just vanish. A huge challenge to civil liberties, the idea of a private life.
And finally,
political accountability compromise. If decisions are made by black box algorithms, if change is too fast for oversight, if discourse is just fleeting trends, how do citizens hold leaders or the systems responsible?
government becomes less responsive, less transparent, less democratic. Power gets harder to challenge.
That closing quote really hits hard. America voted for disruption, now it has to live with it.
Wow. Yeah.
It suggests the choice is made. The consequences, good or bad, are here. How do we protect civil liberties now? What new activism emerges? Can we maybe even use tech for better democracy?
So we've unpacked it. A deep dive into a Musk presidency. You're living in a world where policy might literally be written by code.
Politics powered by Wi-Fi and memes.
And the leader of the free world could be tweeting policy shifts from orbit. Literally.
It's a future that is, without question, bold. Promises amazing innovation, efficiency, a radical new direction towards tech, towards space, rapid progress.
And for many, it's also undeniably terrifying. Challenges our core ideas about democracy, privacy, economic fairness, full of potential for disruption, division, a pace of change leaving many behind.
But above all, it's historic, an irreversible turning point, ready or not.
This whole era forces us to rethink. What is progress? What is governance? If a presidency is all about speed, innovation, digital connection, what happens to the slower stuff?
Yeah, the quiet work, human connection, negotiation, reflection, the things that often underpin our most lasting achievements.
What do we gain? And maybe, what do we lose? Irrevocably. When everything is optimized for speed, for the algorithm.
That's a profound thought to sit with, especially now.
Until next time, stay informed.